Hey everybody, my name is Brandon from thestockseries.com, and today we're going to talk about XPeng Stock, ticker symbol XPEV. We're going to first go into Google and talk about the macro picture of what's going on with XPeng, and then we're going to see how XPeng is doing as a business by going into the earnings report, and then we'll go into the trading charts to see if there's a place to buy XPeng if we want to buy XPeng. So now let's get started. So here we are in the XPeng trading charts here, and as you can see, in about a month we are down over 35%, but in the past couple days we have been rebounding a little bit outwards. So the question is, can XPeng make a comeback up to these previous levels? Well, to answer that, we first need to look around to see what caused the stock to sell off in the first place. And if we look down at the news here, we see, of course, yes, rising interest rates are having an effect on the stock price, but I actually want to dig in a little bit more to the competition aspect of things, which is just touched on briefly in this Market Watch article here. As we can see, this article is talking about Tesla being one of the main electrical vehicle players by 2025. So the main point that I want to make when talking about the macro picture of XPeng here is competition. In economics, there's a concept called the rule of threes. I think this guy, Bryce Henderson, was actually the original guy behind the concept, which is basically the idea that in any mature market, there are only enough space for three big fish in the pond. If we look at the world, you can actually come up with quite a few examples of this in the wild. For example, there are only really three big traditional automakers in the United States. That would be Chrysler, GM, and Ford. As another example, if we look at the three big fast food chains in the United States, in my northeastern part of the United States, we got Burger King, Wendy's, and a small fast food chain called McDonald's. Now, let's talk about the Chinese EV market specifically. Firstly, I don't think that the market is mature enough yet, so the race for the top three spots are still going on. So right now, who are the three big players in the EV market? Of course, if we count them out, it's NIO, Li Auto, XPeng, and Tesla. So if you just did the counting on those automakers here, you may have counted 4 total, which by my math is more than 3. And we're not even counting the tens or hundreds of other startups that are trying to start in this space. And this is the main point I want to make in the video. There is a bunch of competition fighting for the top 3 spots. And this is especially true in the Chinese auto market right now and for any market in general. The question that you have to answer before investing in XPeng is, do you think XPeng will be able to compete against these other EV makers? Why would you want to buy an XPeng car versus a Tesla or a NIO? And remember, we are only talking about the Chinese marketplace right now. There was some news before about XPeng wanting to expand in Europe. While I think this is a good idea to diversify its customer base, you need to think about the new set of competitors on that side of the world. Again, I'm not here to tell you that XPeng will definitely be a top dog in the game or that XPeng will definitely not be a top dog in the game. That is for you to decide because you're investing with your own money. And there's no real right or wrong answer at the moment because nobody can predict the future. But you have to look at the problem objectively and use the evidence to come to your own conclusions on whether XPeng is worth your money. The next point I want to make about the macro picture will be quick, is the interest rates. We've talked about interest rates in the past few videos, and so I won't go through this again, but the main point that I just want to make is that rising interest rates will weigh on the high growth names like XPeng. I also want to talk about the chip shortage quickly, even though we talked about it in previous videos. So again, I don't want to do a deep dive here, but this is again something you have to keep in mind before investing in XPeng. You really can't make an EV car without semiconductors, so you have to keep your eye out on this. XPeng said that it isn't seeing any issues at the moment, but again, this is something in the macro picture outside of XPeng's control that could affect its business. So now, after talking about the macro picture of what's going on in the world and how that's affecting XPeng, let's talk about XPeng specifically and go into the earnings report so that we can see how it's doing as a business. So here we are in XPeng's earnings report here, and this is the most recent quarter ending on December 31st, 2020, and they give us a year-over-year view and a quarter-over-quarter view. If we look at the total revenues here, we see that XPeng is growing fantastically year-over-year as well as quarter-over-quarter, and I think that's even more important. This is a 43% increase quarter over quarter. If we look at the cost of revenues here, which is this block on the earnings report, we see that total cost of sales is increasing year over year and quarter over quarter, but that's because we're selling more cars. Because we're only increasing costs by 39% quarter over quarter, that means that our margins are improving and we should be able to capture more of this total revenues here. And that's a good sign. That's showing that they are improving their business efficiency. The next part of the earnings report that I want to look at is the cost of operations, and that is what we're seeing in this block of the earnings report here. We see that research and development and sales general and administrative is decreasing quarter over quarter, and that is what I want to see, because that's showing that XPeng is really tightening the belt on expenses, at least quarter over quarter, and that's showing me that XPeng wants to hit profitability in their business soon. If we look down at the net loss here, which is this line on the earnings report, because we are growing our revenues more than we are growing our costs of sales, and we are also tightening our belt in the operating expenses here, what that means is that we should be capturing more of this total revenues here. And if we look quarter over quarter, we are lowering our loss by about 30%. Again, this is what I want to see, but you have to understand that we are still losing about 120 million United States dollars in the quarter. Again, not the worst thing in the world. A lot of companies are willing to operate at a loss if the growth rate is fantastic, which XPeng's growth rate is. But you just have to be aware that XPeng's valuation only makes sense if its growth rate continues at a good pace. The risk that you run is that XPeng does not continue growing at around 43% quarter over quarter. If XPeng starts missing its goals, then investors may be wary and could jump out of the name. So after talking about XPeng's fundamentals, now let's head on over to the trade charts to see if there's a level or two to buy XPeng if we want to buy XPeng. So here we are in XPeng's trading charts, and we can see that XPeng has been in a pretty well-defined downtrend ever since the end of January here. Again, this is normally a bearish sign for the stock, but if we take a look at the past couple days, we actually made a fractal here. So what that means is that it's just kind of like a bottom. We see that we hit the $25 level and then bounced right back up from it. Right now, it actually looks like we're at a support and resistance level around this $30 mark. If we look back in time here, we see that we tested this a couple times back in November before gapping strongly upwards on our way up to our all-time highs here. However, if we break this support level, there's not a lot of candles that are cushioning our fall. We could fall back all the way to the mid to lower 20s. Because we are at this $30 resistance level right now, I think your upside risk is this mid to upper 30 level made by these candles and these candles over here. I think that's the next resistance level that we could hit our head at. Lastly, to cover the other major indicators here, we see that the MACD, which is a measure of momentum, is firmly negative. However, if we zoom in here, we see that our blue line, which is a measure of short-term momentum, is turning a little bit positive here. What that's telling me is that we're having strong short-term momentum in the name, which could help lift XPeng upwards. We also see that we are pretty close to crossing over our orange line here, which is the measure of long-term momentum. That is also a bullish sign, and that crossover may trigger some algorithms to buy the stock as well. The next thing I want to talk about here is the RSI, which is another momentum indicator. We see here that we were oversold for quite a few days here before correcting sharply back upwards. Again, this is actually a bullish sign to me, because when a stock is oversold, then that means that it's normally cheaper than where we're normally seeing it. So the question is, what would I do here now? I do like XPeng's growth rate and the controlling of costs. However, I am a fan of NIO more at the moment. That being said, if I wanted to pick up shares of XPeng, I think around this $30 level, support level of $30, I think that this would be a good place to step in. However, I wouldn't unload all of the cash that I had earmarked for XPeng here, because if XPeng breaks this level, then we could, again, like I said, fall all the way back down to the mid to lower 20s. If that happens, then I would want some cash in my back pocket in order to average my cost basis down if the stock continues to fall. So that was my review on XPeng stock. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below. If you have any questions or if you caught any mistakes, also drop me a comment down below. If you liked the video, please like the video. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.